Shocking turn, Millionaire Belittles Nanny, but discover the amazing transformation that followed. Jessica's heart sank as she adjusted her apron, bracing for another day in Mark's grand, cold house. The lawn was impeccable, a sharp contrast to the chaos bubbling inside her. It had been months since the divorce, yet she still felt the sting of inadequacy. Becoming a divorced single mother in her mid-30s had clouded her dreams, pulling her deeper into survival mode. She tended to his children, tender-hearted twins, while trying to keep her own daughter's spirit alive. But every day, Mark's condescending remarks pricked at her self-esteem like thorns on a rose. "Could you make sure they don't break anything, Jessica?" he sneered, leaning against the doorway, arms crossed. "I pay you to manage chaos, not create it." His eyes glinted with disdain, dismissing her as if she were nothing but a cog in his affluent machine. The anger roared inside her, choking the confident woman she once was. She hated that his words could twist her stomach into knots, suffocating her resolve. As she shepherded the children through their lessons, Jessica fought against the heaviness of insecurity that clouded her mind. Why did she let his judgments wound her? Her vision blurred with mounting frustrations. If only she had the chance to pursue her own dreams of a degree in child development. But the weight of bills and the relentless demands of motherhood pushed those aspirations deeper within her. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just when she felt herself fading away, she attended a local seminar led by a passionate educator, who spoke about the transformative impact of early childhood education. The fire ignited within her, daring her to rekindle ambitions buried under mortgaged fears. What if she could become that same light for others' children? She decided to enroll in night classes, the idea shaky but intoxicating, but every evening, after the long days, she trembled under the weight of exhaustion. The tug-of-war between motherhood and ambition clawed at her psyche. As she slowly began to craft her methods, infusing her lessons with heart and creativity, Mark remained a looming shadow. His doubting glances pierced through her growing confidence like arrows, but she was determined to rise. The tension at home escalated. Mark was visibly frustrated by his declining business. Every sneer he tossed Jessica's way felt sharper, more pointed. "Perhaps if you focused on real work instead of your little endeavors," he'd say dismissively, sending ripples of self-doubt crashing through her newfound resolve. But little did he know, each barb was fueling her fire. Just when she felt she was grasping the reins of her life, the foundation of Mark's empire crumbled beneath him. Jessica watched him struggle from the sidelines, this once domineering figure disarmed by the realization of his vulnerability. His desperation shifted the dynamic, forcing him to look at her in a way that made her heart race with conflicting emotions. Caught between empathy and the lingering residue of resentment, the stakes were rising, and Jessica's determination would soon become crucial. Would she hold the power to uplift herself while witnessing a man she once deemed insufferable, now navigating the ruins of his arrogance? The winds of change swirled dangerously close, but the question loomed larger than ever: could she truly harness her own potential without being swallowed by the shadows of the past? Jessica stood in the living room, the echoes of Mark's scorn still ringing in her ears as she navigated the emotional shards lodged deep within her. She glanced at the twins, their innocent laughter a stark contrast to the dark clouds of uncertainty swirling inside her. They had grown so fond of her, seeing her not just as a nanny but as a friend who listened, understood, and cared. Their joy reminded her of everything she once aspired to be: a nurturing figure who inspired and educated, rather than cowered under the weight of derision. Instead of succumbing to despair, Jessica felt a flicker of resolve ignite anew. The night classes had awakened something dormant within her, a part of her that was hungry for knowledge, purpose, and growth. She couldn't allow Mark's relentless skepticism to suffocate that spirit any longer. She had too much to offer herself and the children she cared for. That evening, as she settled down to review her notes, the relentless rhythm of her mind buzzed with determination. She scribbled what she had learned, formulating plans for engaging lessons that would not only captivate the twins but also reflect her own evolving vision. Each stroke of the pen felt liberating, every idea a rebellion against the confines that Mark had imposed upon her life. But just as she began to revel in this newfound empowerment, guilt lurked at the periphery of her consciousness. Hadn't she promised herself to remain focus-driven and pragmatic? Balancing her ambitions with the needs of her daughter weighed heavily on the other side of the scale. The world would notice her absence more than its gain, and she worried about the implications for her family dynamic. The truth was, she could not escape the haunting echo of Mark's critique, "This isn't real work." As chaos in the house escalated with Mark's business crumbling, she recognized a shift in ambience. The man who once wielded financial power with arrogance now wore anxiety like a second skin. Jessica could see the masks of superiority slipping, revealing a raw fragility that had once been hidden beneath mansions and boastful contracts. She had always feared that the loss of his affluence would amplify his disdain toward her. Yet in moments of quiet reflection, she began to realize that his downfall had become an unexpected catalyst for her development. If he could crumble, might she finally dare to rise? She felt her heart race at the prospect, a daring thought born from the rubble of their twisted relationship that it was during one of their increasingly strained interactions that it happened. As Mark raised his voice, directed at the twins for a minor infraction, Jessica felt an impulse to interject. It was a small act, but she realized that her voice once stifled could rise and carry weight. "They are children, Mark," she found herself saying, her tone steady. "They need guidance, not intimidation." The shock on his face mirrored her internal battle. It was a stand she had long avoided. This moment, though fraught with fear, threatened to push her over the precipice of indecision into the realm of empowered action. Could this small act of defiance be the tipping point for her transformation? As she stepped back, asserting her presence, a cascade of realization washed over her. She no longer needed to flutter in his shadow. The path before her, littered with uncertainties, now glimmered with possibilities. But with the change came questions of her own. What boundaries would she need to draw to secure her newfound strength? And how would she manage the shifts in her relationship with Mark, a man who now stood as both an antagonist and an unwitting witness to her evolution? The answers beckoned in the distance, obscured by the fog of doubt and the pangs of transformation. With every resolve she forged, the challenges grew ever more palpable. Her metamorphosis was only beginning. How much more would she have to confront before she could truly embrace her potential? Jessica knew she needed to solidify her voice, paving the way for a more defined existence. As she looked toward the future, everything hung on the precipice of her next move. What risks would she take to stake her claim on her ambitions? The moment had come for her to decide, and only time would tell if she could brave the storm ahead. Jessica awoke the next morning, determination coursing through her veins. As sunlight streamed through the window, it felt as if a promise had been made not merely to herself, but to the twins who needed guidance as much as she did. She crafted a plan, one that intertwined her educational aspirations with their needs. She envisioned the lessons being more than just structured activities. They would empower her to carve out a new identity amidst the tensions with Mark. That a sudden notion struck her: she would incorporate elements of her night classes into the twins' daily experience. Each lesson would intertwine the basics of math and science with art and storytelling, something fun yet intellectually stimulating. A spark ignited within her. This was not just about teaching, it was a declaration that she had something valuable to give. For the first time, she felt the weight of her insecurities lifting. She would no longer be merely Mark's nanny. As she prepared breakfast, the twins' giggles floated from the living room, a reminder of their potential. What if she could harness that joy and direct it toward burgeoning minds? Each smile they exchanged during her improvised lessons on the solar system represented a small victory against her past. However, teaching was only half the battle. The gravity of her improving relationship with the twins forced her to confront her vapors of guilt. What consequences would arise for trespassing into a realm Mark deemed insignificant? A looming voice echoed deep within her: what if this just frustrates him further? Consciously, she resolved that fear would no longer dictate her choices. Instead, she would engage Mark on her terms, asking him to observe her lessons, to see the priceless reactions of the kids as they learned. It could be a pivotal moment not just for herself, but in her evolving dynamic with him. Approaching him with a proposal felt daunting but necessary, an exercise of strength she couldn't ignore. Later in the afternoon, she found Mark pacing his office, checking his phone with a furrowed brow. He appeared like a soldier without direction, his former commanding presence dwindling by the day. She entered carefully, her heart racing. "Mark, can we talk? I have something that might help." He looked up, catching her gaze. There was a hint of reluctance behind his eyes, and she took a breath, summoning every ounce of courage. "I want to develop some lessons for the twins that focus on their creativity and curiosity. I believe they could thrive with proper guidance." His response was a mixture of skepticism and distraction. "They're just kids, Jess. They'll learn when they learn. You're making a big deal out of nothing." Yet this time, she wouldn't flee under the weight of his scorn. "What if I could show you how engaged they can become? Learning could be fun, not just mundane tasks." There was a silence, thick and suffocating. At that moment, Jessica grappled with her inner turmoil. Meeting his disapproval could spur a clash that stifled her assertiveness, or it could invite confrontation, an invitation she felt emboldened to accept. "What can it hurt to let me try?" The calmness in her voice startled her, but it was necessary, anchoring her resolve. He paused, assessing her, grappling to find words that didn't reveal his vulnerabilities. A flash of something resembling intrigue crossed his expression. "Fine, but don't expect too much," he replied, an edge of concession nestled in his tone. Once she left the office, relief mixed with anxiety crashed over her. Did she boldly step forward or merely rattle the cage? Regardless, it marked a departure from compliance. She had planted a seed, would it flourish or wither beneath disapproval? The day faded into night, the children now asleep. She wrapped herself in her thoughts, considering how this new venture reflected her growth. Perhaps the confrontation with Mark had unveiled possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. Yet, an impending realization loomed larger. Her reclamation journey was just igniting. Behind every doubt, every challenge, lay unforeseen revelations of her strength. What boundaries would she draw to ensure this new chapter didn't spiral back into doubt? Could Mark accept changes she initiated? The clock ticked on, and tension pulsed with each breath as she braced for the next inevitable confrontation. Would their changed relationship support her ambitions or shackle her once again? The moment for that truth awaited her in the shadows of their lives. The morning light spilled into the kitchen as Jessica gathered herself, intent on making her vision a reality. The weight of the previous day's confrontation lingered, but it only served to sharpen her focus. She needed a structured approach, uncomplicated yet dynamic enough to captivate the twins. Each lesson would have objectives, yet allow creativity, the right mixture of discipline and freedom. She could feel the excitement building within her. Today would be different. "Let us plan our first class," she murmured, pulling out a notepad. She jotted down her ideas, blending mathematics with sculpture. What better way to teach geometry than through building? The thought delighted her. A playful activity that might unlock deeper understanding. The twins would eagerly immerse themselves. As she prepared, an idea struck her. She would use everyday objects, items around the house, to illustrate her points. If Mark had labeled teaching as trivial, Jessica would elevate it into an engaging experience. The resources were ample. She would make the ordinary extraordinary. Once the twins woke, she corralled them into the living room, where the brightness of the day illuminated their eager faces. "Today, we're going to be builders. Grab your markers and scissors. We're going to create geometric shapes first." They shrieked with delight, and watching them immerse themselves into the project ignited a sense of responsibility in Jessica. Every laugh and exclamation transformed her stubborn self-doubt into conviction. As the hours unfolded, the twins learned not only about shapes but the fun of exploring learning as a shared experience. Yet, Amidst these victories lay a tremor of apprehension. How would her newfound confidence resonate with Mark when he returned home? Would he recognize the progress the twins were making or dismiss it as a fanciful exercise? She steeled herself against his possible reproach, knowing she had poured herself into this lesson more than an adventure. It embodied her commitment to assert her identity. Evening rolled in with an unexpected tension when Mark came home and caught sight of the remnants of the day's projects scattered across the living room. The atmosphere shifted dramatically. He scrutinized the crayons, the butcher paper tapestries, and the cardboard shapes bearing the twins' artistic stamps. "What's all this?" His tone radiated incredulity. Jessica felt the twin sentiments of pride and apprehension swirling within her. "We had a geometry class today. They created structures inspired by different shapes. It was really engaging for them." Mark's brow furrowed, a storm brewed in his eyes. "You think this is valuable? It's just messy. They should be learning the basics, not playing with paper." She swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. Would she back down again, or could she stand her ground? But they've learned so much already: how to collaborate, apply concepts creatively, and most importantly, gain confidence in expressing themselves. His dismissal stung, and Jessica's emotions threatened to spill over. Yet, clarity surged through her senses amidst the chaos. She needed to embody the message she hoped to impart to the twins: value in creativity, the importance of exploration. The stakes were high. This was about more than just lessons. It was about redefining her life within these walls. "Mark," she said, steadying her voice. Each word felt like a deliberate strike against her fears. "What if you observe tomorrow's lesson? Just once, allow me to show you how engaged they can become. You might see something remarkable." For an agonizing moment, silence enveloped them, heavy with unspoken words. She wondered if this would culminate in a breakthrough or dig them deeper into their existing rifts. Mark's expression softened, torn between disbelief and an unfamiliar curiosity. "Fine. I'll see how this goes," he conceded, albeit reluctantly. But Jessica could sense a hint of something. An opening. As she turned to clear the remnants of their class, Jessica's heart raced. Had she made a crucial step forward, or was this just another fleeting moment of courage obscured by his skepticism? Resolved, she reminded herself that her journey was fraught with uncertainty but brimming with potential. Each lesson was not just an opportunity for the twins but a building block for herself. She was learning to evolve, though tumultuous and unwieldy, into a version of herself that resonated with ambition. With anticipation swelling, she prepared for the challenge ahead. This wasn't merely a battle, it was an odyssey of transformation. But the question remained: would her act of defiance catalyze a shift in their relationship, or isolate her further in this unpredictable landscape? Only time would tell in the days to come. The dawn of a new day felt electrifying, each ray of sunlight coaxing Jessica from the remnants of the prior day's tension. Today's lesson would not only be a showcase for the twins but a critical moment for her. She threaded purpose into her morning routine. This was not just teaching, it represented a crossroads, a chance to affirm her growing identity in this emotionally charged environment. As she gathered supplies from around the house, she paused, caught in a moment of self-reflection. Each crafted item around her, be it construction paper or simple string, seemed infused with potential. They were no longer mere objects, they became vehicles for igniting curiosity and creativity. She allowed herself to imagine, not just what the twins could learn, but what she had to prove to herself. Gone was the timid woman who once feared disapproval. Today, she would be an architect of minds. With the twins once again buzzing with enthusiasm, she launched into the day's agenda. "We're going to blend science with art today. We'll build a mini robot using recycled materials, and while we do that, we'll talk about the principles of balance and movement." Their eyes lit with excitement, and Jessica felt a thrill of empowerment. Here she was, driving their engagement and molding their thoughts. As they began, their creativity sprawled across the living room floor. The twins clumsily fumbled with empty boxes, string, and markers, but the chaos birthed laughter and imagination. Every time they stumbled upon a fallen piece or an unfinished project, they bonked heads with sparkling eyes full of determination and teamwork. Jessica basked in their palpable joy, and her heart brimmed with pride. This was what learning looked like. It was messy, bold, and absolutely riveting. However, beneath the surface of this joyous chaos lay the simmering anxiety about Mark's impending appearance. She stole glances out the window, waiting for the familiar figure to return and challenge her hard-fought confidence. What if he didn't see the value in their creations? When Mark finally arrived home, an uneasy breeze swept through the room. Jessica felt her skin tighten as he stepped into their vibrant mess. His gaze immediately darted to the building blocks of creativity littering the floor, the cardboard boxes, the tangled strings, and the bits of marker-smeared paper. "What's all this?" he asked, his disbelief spilling over. Jessica faced him, her heart racing. "We're exploring robotics. The twins are learning about balance and design." The words burst forth, steady and unwavering, but Mark's skepticism showed no signs of relenting. "It looks like a landfill of junk," he snapped, his voice laden with derision. She felt the familiar pang of hurt, but this time, she paused, allowing herself to breathe through the sting. "No," she replied, surprising herself with her assertiveness. "It's a green light for imagination and learning." They're engaged and excited. Each word became a deliberate counterweight to the weight of his skepticism. With a quiet intensity, Mark inspected their work, his frown deepening. Jessica held her breath, bracing for the inevitable storm of criticism while desperately seeking the strength to stand her ground. "Why can't they learn from books?" he asked, frustration palpable in his tone. "Because learning isn't just about memorizing pages. It's about exploring the world we live in," she argued, fighting back against the tide of self-doubt. "What they gain here, this creativity, the ability to think outside the box, it'll help them in ways you can't calculate." She realized that this conversation was transcending the mere contention over teaching methods. It was a revelation that marked her evolution, a chance to redefine not just her approach to education but her role in her own life. Mark stared at her, caught off guard, the tension crackling in the air as unspoken emotions permeated the silence that followed. Had her words ignited a flicker of understanding in him? In that heartbeat, as they stood amidst the chaotic remnants of imagination, something shifted in the fabric of their dynamic. Was it recognition? Or a mere begrudging acceptance? Jessica felt a fire flicker within. This was not just about defending her choices but forging her persona in the shadow of resistance. She realized that learning could be a battleground, but it was also a pathway to self-discovery. What lay ahead in their relationship was uncertain, yet she felt an unrelenting urge to seize this newfound momentum. As the hour waned, Jessica turned back to the twins, their excitement infectious. Little did she know that the spark she ignited in the living room would echo beyond these settings, presenting challenges that would magnify her resolve and redefine her future. On the horizon awaited not just lessons of art and science but personal reckonings that would demand even greater courage. And with her heart pounding with anticipation, she apprehended a critical truth: it was no longer solely about the twins' education. It was about her story unfolding in an unexpected, often messy, but beautifully complex tapestry. An unexpected visitation loomed ahead, an invitation that could reshape everything. Would Jessica dare to embrace it? And how would Mark reconcile with this newfound chapter? Jessica awoke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose. The confrontation with Mark had left a residue of anxiety in her chest, but it also fueled a rare determination. She was no longer at the mercy of doubts. Instead, she felt the flicker of empowerment igniting within her. Today was a chance to further explore this transformation, not just for herself but for the twins in her care. She immersed herself in planning a new lesson, one that combined storytelling with problem-solving. Every word she wrote on the whiteboard felt like a brick stacked in the foundation of her burgeoning self-confidence. "Today, we'll create a story that incorporates science," she announced to the twins. Initially, they exchanged glances of confusion, but Jessica's eyes sparkled with conviction. "We'll build characters and craft their journeys while discovering how forces and energy influence their tales." As the twins digested the idea, Jessica observed their expressions shift from uncertainty to intrigue. It struck her how important it was to articulate her vision clearly, presenting them not only with a lesson but an adventure. She felt the satisfaction bloom in her chest as they began brainstorming their story, spurred on by her enthusiasm. In the midst of their collaboration, she sensed a shift in the dynamic of her relationships. Every question answered resonated deeply, and their creative juices flowed seamlessly, transforming the once daunting task into an exhilarating escapade. For the first time, instead of merely occupying the role of a caretaker, she felt herself becoming a co-creator alongside the twins, their imaginations entwined with her own. Yet, the specter of Mark loomed over her mind, still tainted by the doubt he'd planted. As the day wore on, Jessica experienced moments of hesitation. Each spark of inspiration was often interrupted by an internal dialogue that questioned whether her methods would ever gain his approval. She struggled to disentangle her self-worth from his opinions, acutely aware that their relationship was intertwined with her ongoing personal development. Later that afternoon, as they took a break from creating their narrative, Jessica spotted a letter on the kitchen table addressed to her. With shaky hands, she opened it. The handwriting was familiar. It was an invitation from her old college professor to participate in an upcoming workshop focused on creative pedagogy. Jessica's heart raced. The workshop was designed for educators who wanted to explore unconventional teaching techniques, something she was becoming increasingly passionate about. This was exactly what she needed: a platform to deepen her understanding and showcase her commitment to reinventing education. Her mind filled with swirling thoughts of what the workshop might mean for her future. Not only would it provide opportunities for growth and development, but it also positioned her firmly within a community of like-minded individuals, all eager to redefine learning environments. But there was a simmering conflict within her. The thought of Mark's potential reaction loomed large. How would he perceive her decision to pursue this opportunity? Would he scoff at her ambitions, dismissing them as frivolous? Jessica's heart pounded as doubts flared anew. Could she risk learning and expanding her reach when his presence often dimmed her light? Determined to forge ahead, she tightened her grip on the letter, transforming uncertainty into resolve. If she was going to assert herself in this new chapter, she needed to take action, be it applying for the workshop or boldly facing Mark's skepticism. It was time to confront her fears head-on and redefine her narrative. The twins gathered around her, their laughter punctuating the air. They had turned a blank canvas into a swirling cosmos of colors, characters, and chaotic energy, mirroring Jessica's whirlwind of emotions. In that moment, the gravity of her choices crystallized. This wasn't just about creating inspiring lessons. It was about constructing a life unencumbered by the fears that had long defined her. As the sun dipped low, casting shadows across the room, Jessica realized that the time had come to embrace her journey. Her next steps were uncertain, but a quiet strength began to surge within her. She needed to dive into this opportunity, to see what the future held beyond the limitations she had imposed upon herself. Taking a deep breath, she resolved to send her application by the end of the week. She could feel the thrill of possibility pulse through her veins, marking the transition from the pull of Mark's doubt to navigating her own path. But as she glanced at the twins, a foreboding thought crept in. What if this decision strained her relationship with Mark? What would it mean if he found out about her plans before she was ready to share them? With that thought, the room seemed to darken, a new tension threading through the air. In her search for growth and clarity, she was faced with a moral dilemma that could either strengthen or fracture the fragile balance of her world. Would she stand firm, advocating for herself, or shrink back into the shadows of her insecurities? Jessica awoke the next morning with an uneasy anticipation swirling within her. The decision to apply for the workshop hung over her like a storm cloud, fostering both excitement and dread. She had resolved to embrace her path, yet the shadows of doubt edged into her mind as she prepared breakfast for the twins. Were these aspirations, this need to grow, worth the inevitable confrontation with Mark? As she poured cereal into bowls, her hands trembled slightly, echoing the uncertainty spiraling within. She had managed to divert her attention from Mark's looming presence before, but today felt different. Today, the quiet budding of her ambitions threatened to clash with the established order of her life. With the twins chattering exuberantly at the table, she realized that their excitement masked the internal battle she was waging. They were completely engaged in their story, and a pang of longing shot through her. Their uninhibited creativity stirred something profound in Jessica, awakening a desire to break free from the confines Mark had inadvertently placed on her. She wanted to infuse that same spirit into every aspect of her life. After breakfast, Jessica gathered the twins for another session of story crafting. The energy was infectious, and as they delved deeper into their imaginative world, Jessica felt the bubbles of insecurities begin to dissipate. Yet, a subtle tension brewed at the back of her mind, whispering reminders of the confrontation that loomed ahead. She pushed those thoughts aside, focusing instead on the characters the twins were creating. The three of them worked diligently, their ideas colliding in jubilant chaos. Just as Jessica began to lose herself in the joy of creation, the door swung open. Mark entered, exuding an air of authority that shifted the atmosphere instantly. The air thickened, and Jessica's heart raced as she felt his eyes lock onto her. "Looks like the twins are having some fun," he commented, his tone casual, yet his gaze sharp. "What are you teaching them this time?" Jessica straightened, determined to hold her ground. "We're integrating science into storytelling. It's about creating engaging narratives that also help them learn." He raised an eyebrow, suppressing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Interesting approach. Not sure how well that'll go down. Kids usually prefer straightforward lessons." Her stomach turned. "But this method encourages critical thinking and creativity, Mark. It's essential for their developmental growth." He leaned back against the wall, crossing his arms. "Sure, if you don't mind spending hours untangling their ideas. Sometimes, straightforward is what's needed." Every fiber of Jessica's being resisted the urge to shrink away. The twins' laughter, once a buoy of encouragement, started to feel like an anchor dragging her down as his presence loomed larger. She could feel doubt creeping back in. What if he was right? What if her methods were frivolous? But just as despair began to engulf her, a glimmer of determination sparked. She gathered her resolve and pushed through the uncertainty. "That's exactly the point, Mark. Sometimes it's important to step outside the conventional boundaries to foster real engagement. I believe in what we're doing here." For a moment, silence enveloped the room. Jessica felt raw vulnerability tinged with defiance. The twins had paused, their wide eyes darting between the two adults, sensing the brewing tension. Mark seemed to weigh her words, the flicker of curiosity surfacing beneath his skeptical exterior. "All right, let us see what happens then." He shrugged nonchalantly, but she detected an undertone of challenge in his voice. "If you're so keen on this approach, it better lead to tangible outcomes. I'm interested to see how you measure success." His words hung in the air, a gauntlet thrown. As he turned to leave, a mix of elation and trepidation swirled inside Jessica. She had stood her ground, yet the weight of impending expectations pressed heavily on her. With her pulse quickening, she faced the twins, ready to dive back into their imaginative escapade, but the heaviness of Mark's ultimatum sat uneasily. She needed to prove not only to him but also to herself that her aspirations were valid. The stakes were clear. She had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back now. That afternoon, as she prepared to commit her application to the workshop, her determination feigned a sense of calm. But as the day darkened, so too did her resolve, giving way to an internal whirlwind. What if the coming weeks tested her ability to balance ambition with the expectations of Mark? Clutching the letter, Jessica knew one thing: she had to confront both her aspirations and her fears. This workshop could become her sanctuary or her battleground. The outcome depended not only on her actions but on how she navigated her shifting relationship with Mark, and as she exhaled, the thought loomed: how would she measure success in this fractured dynamic? Would she rise above it, or step back once more into the shadows? The answer awaited her, just beyond the horizon of her fears. Jessica stood at her kitchen island, heartbeat echoing in her ears as she held the application letter in her trembling hands. The ink seemed to mock her, each carefully crafted word a reminder of her ambition against the backdrop of self-doubt. What had she gotten herself into? Was pursuing this workshop truly the right choice, or yet another folly destined to fade against a tide of Mark's skepticism? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows in the kitchen, a stark contrast to the bright ideas she had shared with the twins only hours before. Their laughter had faded into the periphery, replaced by the imminent reality of her situation. The weight of Mark's words hung heavy over her like a dark cloud, success measured by tangible results, a challenge that could very well unravel her newfound confidence. With the twins still immersed in their imaginative worlds, Jessica ventured upstairs and settled into her small, shared office space, cluttered with papers, books, and remnants of her unsettled thoughts. Each item whispered reminders of her ambitions that echoed in her mind. She needed to devise a plan, one that would not only impress Mark but also reaffirm her own belief in the power of creativity. She flipped through her notes, her fingers brushing against sketches of storylines that intertwined education and entertainment. She had always believed that stories could help children navigate complex concepts, but now those very principles felt inadequate against the imposing wall of Mark's skepticism. His standards threatened to redefine her aspirations into something more mundane. The idea sent a shiver down her spine. Jessica took a deep breath, pushing back against the surge of self-doubt. What if she could articulate her approach more effectively? She began to write down her thoughts, focusing on how storytelling could ignite curiosity, foster engagement, and most importantly spark learning in ways traditional methods could not. But could Mark really be convinced? A voice in her head questioned if she was capable of turning his skepticism into belief. He had so often dismissed her ideas as whimsical, a mere distraction from what he deemed serious education. Yet, she recalled the glimmer of curiosity she had seen in his eyes this afternoon. Maybe it was time to confront him directly with how she could measure success. Fingers poised over her laptop, she began to craft a proposal. It wasn't merely about proving a point, this was about creating a foundation for the kids that could translate beyond their living room. She envisioned tangible outcomes, progress sheets, performance evaluations based on engagement, and imaginative projects that held educational merit. As the sun dipped lower, Jessica found herself entangled in a whirlwind of ideas. In facing Mark's challenge, she realized she was discovering not only strategies but a deeper understanding of her own capabilities. She was not simply responding to criticism, she was embracing a mission that aligned with her beliefs. The evening air grew cooler, and as her fingers typed faster, her confidence burgeoned. Mark had inadvertently ignited something inside her, a determination to showcase the value of her approach that didn't require permission to exist. Stepping back from the intense concentration, she smiled, feeling a rush of exhilaration. She wasn't just ready to submit an application, she was poised to redefine her role, proving not just to Mark but also to herself that she had the power to craft her narrative. But what if the excitement she felt now began to falter in the weeks to come? What if Mark's expectations became an overwhelming force? Questions flickered through her mind, stirring feelings of uncertainty. As she uploaded her proposal to send to the workshop, a new challenge deepened in her heart. The moment she dreaded might soon arrive when she would need to present her ideas to Mark, not just to defend them, but to inspire him to see the vision she had painted. Jessica sat in silence, her heart racing anew. The confrontation with Mark wouldn't merely be about establishing her credibility, it would thrust them both into a dance of persuasion and belief. The stakes were rising. What would happen when she faced him next? Would she find the partnership she craved, or would she be confronted with more resistance than ever before? The journey to redefine success had truly begun. The following day, Jessica's resolve felt palpable, like a tightly coiled spring ready to unleash its energy. She spent the night fine-tuning her proposal, transforming it from a simple outline into a compelling narrative. Each line resonated with her passion, and as she pored over the details once more, she could almost see the learning environment she envisioned come to life. Yet, the reality of her situation loomed. She would soon lay it all bare before Mark. As the morning sun filtered through her office window, Jessica's mind whirred with anticipation and apprehension. What if her words fell flat? What if Mark dismissed her proposal as mere fantasy once again? The risk of emotional exposure tugged at her, urging her to back down. But the thought of retreating triggered an inner revolt. This was her chance to stand firm, to leverage her creativity and insight into something genuine. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from the spiral of doubts. It was a message from Mark, inquiring if they could meet that evening to discuss the proposal. A quick glance at the time confirmed she had only a few hours left to prepare. Anxiety wove its way into her thoughts as she felt her heart race. Would their meeting be a critique session or a collaboration? Validation had always been scarce in her interactions with him. To succeed, she would not only have to defend her ideas, but also show her belief in them with relentless conviction. Jessica took a deep breath, grounding herself in the reality of her progress rather than the potential pitfalls. With focused determination, she spent her afternoon rehearsing her presentation aloud. Her voice grew steadier, and the new conviction in her words began to feel like armor. She visualized the room, imagining Mark's expression as she addressed his concerns head-on, explaining how storytelling could anchor academic concepts in emotional experiences, creating resonance far beyond paper tests. A glance at the clock confirmed that the hour had arrived. She stood in front of the mirror, smoothing her hair and reminding herself of the importance of confidence. "You belong here," she whispered, her voice firm against the whisper of self-doubt that had lingered so often in her heart. The meeting space was brightly lit, the walls lined with eclectic artwork, each piece a vivid representation of perspective and imagination, a poignant reminder of the very essence she hoped to convey in her proposal. Mark was already seated when she arrived, his wristwatch glinting under the ceiling lights as he glanced up from his notes, a mixture of curiosity and skepticism reflected in his eyes. "Let us see what you've got," he said, leaning back in his chair. His tone was neutral, almost impassive, but Jessica sensed the gravity of the moment hanging between them. She steadied herself, knowing this was the crucible in which her confidence would be tested. As she began to articulate her vision, Jessica felt an unexpected shift in the room. The initially rigid dynamic started to thaw as she spoke, igniting the spark of enthusiasm that had fueled her late-night writing. She showcased her strategy, supporting it with examples that blended creativity with solid educational principles. Jessica transitioned smoothly through her proposal, conscious of how Mark's expression shifted from detached observation to thoughtful consideration. Here was the ultimate test, and as she reached the middle of her pitch, she dared to draw him into the narrative, asking questions that challenged his preconceived notions. "Imagine if the twins could demonstrate their learning through storytelling, articulating their ideas in a way that transcends traditional assessments," she suggested, her voice steady and compelling. Soon enough, she could see the flicker of engagement in his eyes, but just as the momentum built, she hesitated, the dread of rejection creeping back in. Could she really convince him? And then, in a flash of clarity, she decided to invite a dialogue rather than an inquisition. "What do you think needs to change for us to measure success effectively?" Mark leaned forward, a glimmer of interest sparking behind his gaze. The power of the moment lay in the unfamiliar territory of mutual exploration, a dynamic she had yearned for. But then, as he began to respond, Jessica sensed an undercurrent of skepticism still lingering in his words. The battle was far from won. What if his defenses rose again? The stakes loomed larger than ever, entrancing her with the crucial embrace of real collaboration or the threat of total dismissal. She gripped her notes tighter, the heat of the moment electrifying. Would today reshape her narrative, or would it push her deeper into Mark's incredulity? The conversation had only just begun, and the shadows of doubt remained, lurking just outside the edge of hope. Would her leap of faith result in the partnership she so desperately sought, or would it backfire, pushing her 2 steps back? The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but she knew one thing for sure: the real challenge was only now unfolding. With each passing moment, Jessica felt her narrative unfold before her. The words she had rehearsed were flowing organically, painting a vivid tapestry of her vision. She stood before Mark, but this time her confidence was emboldened by the journey she had undertaken. "Imagination," she began, her tone ramping with passion, "is not just a diversion from education, it is the gateway to deeper understanding." As she watched Mark's eyebrows inch closer in contemplation, she pressed on, emphasizing real-world implications. When children learn through stories, they build connections not just with the material, but with themselves. Mark's initial skepticism began to wane. The walls of rigidity he often encased himself within appeared to soften as his expression shifted from dismissive to one of contemplative intrigue. For the first time, Jessica felt she was not only presenting her case but laying the groundwork for collaboration. As the discussion evolved, they navigated through the realms of creativity, engagement, and measurable outcomes. She articulated how storytelling could cultivate critical thinking, a skill Mark valued deeply. With every question he posed, Jessica met him with clarity and assurance, referencing her nightly classes and the inspiration they had ignited. Imagine if we tracked not just grades, but engagement metrics. We could show how students express their understanding through creative projects, she proposed, and to her astonishment, Mark leaned in, genuinely interested. We might just find out that creativity fosters retention better than rigid frameworks. During that meeting, Jessica sensed they were bridging their once stark gap. Where Mark had once cast doubt, his thoughts now danced with potential rather than skepticism. She approached the integration of creativity in education as something valid, worthy of pursuit. As they bantered ideas back and forth, she marveled at what had shifted. She was no longer merely Mark's employee, but a credible partner with shared goals. The enormity of what transpired hit her as they began to hash out a plan. Mark suggested that they work together on a curriculum outline, allowing her the freedom to conceptualize and execute lessons while he provided the logistical support. Their collaboration promised to yield a tangible outcome that neither had predicted. Jessica felt a surge of pride and recognition course through her. She had not only fought her fears but had successfully instigated a partnership rooted in respect and shared ambition. It was a metamorphosis that allowed her to demonstrate her competence and reclaim her narrative. The meeting concluded with a renewed energy and an agreement to begin drafting lessons for the following week. As she left the room, a sense of accomplishment enveloped her. She had harnessed her ambition, tested her voice, and ultimately reshaped her relationship with both Mark and herself. Days turned to weeks, each providing new opportunities and challenges. The twins thrived under their enriched curriculum, radiating joy with every revelation. Jessica felt fulfilled in a way she hadn't in years. As she entered her home one crisp afternoon, the energy echoed with excitement from the living room where laughter wafted as the twins narrated their latest stories. However, the defining moment of her transformation came when Jessica received an email regarding the workshop. Acceptance pinged in her inbox. Heart racing, she hardly contained her exhilaration. This was a professional milestone. She was officially stepping into an environment that nurtured her aspirations. As the twins bounded over, eager to share their day, Jessica caught a glimpse of their joy and reflected on her own fluttering hopes. She had successfully woven her dreams back into her life despite the initial scorn she faced. They no longer saw her merely as their nanny but as a visionary, mirroring the journey they were all taking together. Jessica's transformation was complete. She stood not only as a nurturer of young minds but as a beacon of resilience and aspiration. The ache of inadequacy was replaced by solid confidence in her professional abilities and a recognized competence in her role both as an educator and a mother. Having conquered her obstacles, she emerged proud of the life she sculpted, one that celebrated growth and courage. From every lesson she crafted, to the laughter they shared, Jessica had built a life imbued with meaning and interconnected aspirations. She became an architect of her destiny, her dreams no longer stifled but alive, paving a route that others could follow. The meeting with Mark had not only redefined their dynamic but had given her the courage to reach for her ambitions and secure a position designed for her growth. This was the moment she had long fought for, the culmination of her struggles transformed into meaningful purpose. As she settled down that evening with the twins, surrounded by remnants of creativity and love, Jessica understood this was merely the beginning. She was equipped now to navigate the complexities of her new path, empowered to advocate for herself and her dreams without hesitation. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that inspire transformations like Jessica's. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show that you believe in the power of personal growth stories. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Jessica's incredible journey and how she found her voice. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion, because you know they'll resonate with the importance of pursuing dreams courageously. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.